In Module 3, we will discuss the purpose, planning, and tracking of demonstrations of learning. So what exactly is an exit ticket or a demonstration of learning, or DOL? This is any type of brief formative assessment that a teacher provides at the end of a lesson to gather data for immediate feedback. This allows the teacher to identify any misconceptions or errors and plan for reteaching. But it's also a tool that the student can use to self-assess, for self-reflection, and it also is a way to hold them accountable for their engagement and participation. Recently, one of my Canadian friends and I were having a discussion about formative assessment, and she made a comment to me that she felt that formative assessment was a conversation between the teacher and the student. And for me, that was a new way of thinking, and I really like that, because I think we tend to think of assessments as something we take from students. And by looking at it as a conversation, as a two-way communication, it's a way for us to ask the student and a way for them to respond back. So it's not just something that we're doing to them, but it's a way of involving them and giving them a voice in the future planning. So I'm curious what you think about that. I look forward to having a discussion with you about formative assessment as a conversation. So there are many benefits to using an exit ticket. Please read through these at your leisure. But there's one caution that I do want to talk about. One thing that I've seen over and over again is that teachers do not plan adequate time at the end of the lesson to allow students to reflect and to give a meaningful response. Sometimes it really is something that students are literally completing as they're dashing out the door. So be mindful of this, as that you will allow time in your daily schedule for students to provide solid feedback on their learning. And also that it does not have to have a Scantron answer sheet. That was never the intent of an exit ticket. An exit ticket is something that is brief, informative. I know that some campuses that is out of your control. That is the way that they choose to track that data. And we're going to looking at the success criteria for exit ticket is very similar to the criteria that we use in designing our objectives. The vocabulary, we want to make sure that it's the vocabulary that our students can leverage as they are facing assessments. The academic strong language, is it a manageable task? Is it distinct for that day? Does it progress in rigor? Is it manageable? And also, one point that I would add, how is this connected to the listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking? As an advocate for our bilingual ESL students and for students who need those accommodations, I encourage you to think about the different modes of communication. And as you are assessing formatively, think about how you can utilize listening, speaking, writing, reading, different tools that you can use throughout the year to provide students an opportunity to practice with those in those areas, and also to demonstrate their learning using a variety of modes of communication. So once you have that data in hand, whether it's a sticky note or a pile of graphic organizers students have completed, what do you do with it? This is when the important work begins for your PLC or your grade level team. As you sort and analyze that data and you ask those reflective questions about student performance and where are the errors, where are the patterns, what percentage of mastery, and then planning for that Tier 2 reteach. I believe strongly if we have a strong Tier 1 and Tier 2, we'll never get to Tier 3. And then also remembering that it's not just about questioning the students' behaviors, but ours as well, even more so. What changes or adjustments do we need to make in instruction, or do I, as a teacher, need to make? Is it in the grouping? Is it in the classroom environment or structure? Perhaps it's in the language. Do I need to use the home language or provide academic language support? Checking my attitudes and my beliefs about the students. If I'm finding myself battling with students being non-compliant or disengaged, perhaps I need to see if there's something about my attitudes or beliefs, if there's a prejudice that's coming through that I'm not aware of, that I need to make adjustments for, so that all the students in my classroom feel welcome and that this is an environment where everyone can learn. So we talked about tracking the data. Instead of using a Scantron, perhaps it's just something like this very simple form that my friends at Rankin Elementary used last year. It was a class tracking sheet where they listed the student name, the date, the TEK, and the percent correct, or the percent for mastery. So this was used for class-wide monitoring of the exit tickets. Or perhaps one like this, where they have you're tracking it by those student groups. You're watching those groups because we want those to be fluid and kids moving in and out of those groups throughout the year. Perhaps it's going to look something like this form, where it's totally about the teacher reflecting on their practices and as they look at those assessments. So whichever form that you choose, the purpose of these anecdotal notes are to record behaviors over a period of time. And this cumulative information provides not only information about the student, but the teacher practices that help you gain insights and reflection. It's a great conversation tool to have with your principal and your team in planning those next steps for instruction and for professional development as well. Exit tickets take on many forms. There's a list here for you to review, but also thinking about things like using the whiteboards for responses, the thumbs up, thumbs down, turn and talk. So maybe that exit ticket is you walking around the classroom with a clipboard while the students are engaging, and you're stopping and checking using one of these type of responses and recording that information. During our emergency at-home learning, we were forced, everyone, to depend upon technology, and we experienced a growth. So if you notice on the screen here, I tried to add in some of the programs and tools that I know surged in usage over this time. And many of these could be used as ways of formative assessment. So I encourage you to keep learning, keep sharing with one another your successes and how you plan to continue with these in your classrooms this next school year. One thing we want to point out is that whether you knew it or not, there are 6th grade standards for technology. I have provided a link for you there. You will see there are 6 strands of the technology standards. Now, please don't panic if you've never seen this or never formally thought about integrating. I think once you look at this, you'll find that you've already integrated quite a few of those, and you just need to start giving yourself credit for it. Another document, and these are all found on the technology page of our AISD website, is the scope and sequence, which I thought was very important because looking at that checklist can be a little overwhelming. But this breaks it down for you as to when skills are introduced, when they're practiced, mastery, and then, of course, I love this, the fact that they realize that kids need to be reviewing that it's not some mastery and we're done, that it's something that kids need to keep practicing. So again, Please don't panic. Don't feel like you have to include all of these in your lessons. Just want to make you aware of that as you are planning continuing on with the blended learning. For instructional purposes, for this course, strands 1 through 4 are the ones that we're looking at. How we integrate these 4 into instruction as we plan for next year. The success criteria, again, will always be something to come back to as your standard of measurement. The 3 top tools that have been recommended for student engagement and learning: Flipgrid, Edpuzzle, Pear Deck. You can find training opportunities. I've provided for you some examples of tech integration that you might want to look at. And this is a sample plan that shows how we go from the daily objective to planning the technology to planning our exit ticket. And you will note that in this plan, there are options to use technology and then options without technology. So I encourage you to think about that as you're planning to consider both options as we are uncertain what our school year may look like next year. Your assignment is to do exactly that. You will continue with the TEK that you've been assigned, to review those technology standards that have been linked for you, and to think about how you would create an exit ticket for that objective. You don't actually have to create that here. That will be in the next module. But just planning out how you might do that with technology and without technology. And then those criteria, those success criteria are listed there again for your reference. I've also linked for you on this form the standards, the technology standards. You can click this form to get a downloadable copy. There's also an assignment button in the module list that will take you to this form. So as we finish out this section, some questions that I'm thinking about or I'm pondering is what discussions you and your team may have already had about technology integration and equity. How do you plan to continue on next year? And thinking about demonstrations of learning, how will students use technology to do that? What about students who don't have access to technology? What will their options be? If you could take 1 or 2 tools to become an expert in this year, which one would you choose? I would encourage you not to go more than 3. 1 would be amazing if you learn 1 and do it well. And then what about our 6th grade students? What do kids really need to know and be able to show to demonstrate developmentally appropriate mastery of technology integration? And do all teachers know where to go to find those technology expectations? You do, now you know, so maybe you can share with others. So these are all questions that I hope we have time to discuss, maybe not in this course, but as the year goes on. And please know that I'm open to discussions at any time. And if you have any questions about your assignment, please reach out for clarification if needed or help in any way. I look forward to seeing your plans for how you might incorporate technology into your exit tickets, or how you would choose not to. What would you do different with your exit tickets and your DOLs next year? So I look forward to seeing your responses. And again, please feel free to reach out for help if needed.